So we're going to go through the main steps of the FAFSA. So the FAFSA has 7 steps, which is creating the profile, the student demographics, a portion where you do the school selection, the dependency status, parent demographics, if you are a dependent student, financial information, and then finally signing and submitting the FAFSA. So in order to start the FAFSA, like I mentioned earlier, you're going to need an email for both the parent and the student. And this is email is for to be able to create what's called an FSA ID. And the FSA ID allows you to sign the FAFSA electronically. So it's very, very important that the parent has an FSA ID and that the student has an FSA ID. If you're a dependent student, if you're an independent student, then only the student needs an FSA ID. If this is your first time completing the FAFSA, you're gonna have to create this FSA ID only once, and you're gonna be able to use this throughout the times of whenever you complete the FAFSA. Anything you'd like to add, Hallie?
I think that's it. Yuri does a great job, and just don't get intimidated by the terminology. FSA ID, really all that means is an email and a password. As long as you remember the email that you used, you can always reset the password. You can reset via text or email. And then if you do forget the password, you might just have to call Federal Student Aid. Also, bonus, if you or anyone you know is interested in ORSA, we're primarily talking about FAFSA, but on the right-hand side is the start of the ORSA application. So I think you will get some bonus ORSA sneak peeks. So cool. I think we still have some of both on the slides if you're interested in kind of seeing how that looks today too.
Yes. Okay. So for the student demographic portion, it's going to look something like this. This is a screenshot of the FAFSA of the student demographics, and it's going to ask you for an address, a city, the state that you're in, a zip code, and then your email address. Pretty straightforward. This is pretty easy to complete and fill out. And then in the school selection portion, it's going to ask you to select the schools that you want your FAFSA to go to. And I believe, Jennifer, you wanted to say something on this slide.
Yes, I have a couple things. So first off, we have a question, Yuri, and the question is, does the financial aid amount change depending on which college you attend? So let's answer that question first.
Yes, it can. So the federal financial aid, so student loans and Pell Grant, should be the same at every school if you sent the same FAFSA. So let's say you put Oregon State on the FAFSA, submit it, and then you go back in, make a correction, you put all zeros of all the income, and then you had your University of Oregon, send it to them. Well, they got different information. So they got 2 different FAFSAs, so they're going to award you different information. But if the schools get the same information, you will have, if you're eligible for Pell Grant, it'll be the same. If you are eligible for the loans, it will be close to the same amount, maybe different distribution. Then it depends on if the college is going to offer you scholarships or other aid. So the short answer is yes, it can be different. And then we're going to talk about this, I think, a little bit more. And you can definitely follow up with myself, Jennifer, Yuri. Besides looking at how much financial aid a college is offering you, you really do need to look at the cost. For example, if you are interested in a private liberal arts school, let's say they offer you $20,000 in scholarships. Awesome, that is a lot of money. But the cost of attendance is $50,000. If another college, they only offer you like one, oh my gosh, I can't do basic math. You guys got to help me. If they only offer you like 10,000, but the cost of attendance is only 20,000, it's still cheaper to go to the other school, even though they offered you less aid. So you don't want to just look at the amount. You've got to look at some other factors. But the short answer is yes, it can be different.
Did we talk about, like, at a community college, if they could qualify for Oregon Promise, so they might get a little extra help that way as well, which the universities do not have access to Oregon Promise money. So anyway, that is also one option that could end up getting you more money as if you go to a community college and end up with some Oregon Promise money, correct? Hallie? Yeah, okay.
Yes.
Shaking her head, yes. So on this piece, the school selection piece, Yuri was talking about that you're going to select the schools that you want to send your FAFSA to. I run into with a lot of students come May, June, where we start going in and checking out award letters and making sure that financial aid has come through, and we're looking at all that. And sometimes we'll be looking at the student portal and the student will have no information under their financial aid. And it's normally, in my experience with the help that I've been giving students for the past however many years, they for some reason did not select having the FAFSA actually sent to this particular school. So like maybe you changed your mind and decided to actually apply to a school later on that you didn't remember to send the FAFSA to, and you can still send it. It's not too late, but hopefully again, there's still money left at that school. Like Hallie was talking about, sometimes schools can give out all their financial aid before a certain amount of time. So anyway, it's just really important to make sure you select all the schools that you want the FAFSA sent to, and that you can send it to as many schools as you want to. So you just select that in this section and make sure that it's going. And if you change your mind, it's real easy to go back in even after you're done with your FAFSA and change this section and actually have it sent to the schools that you decided to apply to, or if you decide to add a couple schools. So that's what I wanted to talk about here.
Yes, Jennifer, you made a great point. You can add as many schools as you like. On the FAFSA, I think there's a limit of 10 on there that you can list. But yeah, I mean, if you come across completing the FAFSA and you haven't applied to a certain school, but you think you're going to apply, just put it on there. It's fine. You don't get charged for adding a school. Okay. Dependency status. This one can be a little tricky for students. Do you want to take this one on, Hallie?
Sure. I'll give my spiel and then anyone chime in to add comprehension or clarity. So this is a big source of frustration. Unfortunately, whether or not your parents are able or willing to contribute for your education, typically if you're under 24, not married, not in graduate school, having your own children, or meeting some of these other not really common circumstances, you have to include your parents' information on your FAFSA. If it is like you have an abusive or unhealthy situation with your parents, definitely don't put yourself in an unhealthy situation to get their information. Go talk, do what you can, and then go talk to the financial aid offices of the colleges you're interested in. But the majority of the time, if you're not meeting one of these strict criteria or in an unhealthy, unfortunate situation such as referenced, you are going to be considered dependent and need to include your parent information. Whether you agree with it or like it or not, it's what the federal government decided at this time. So the federal law would have to change for that to change.
Correct. And a very common scenario is students who are in college, their first year, and they're completing their FAFSA again. And, they live on campus and whatnot. And they say, well, my parents don't support me financially anymore. I'm paying my expenses. I am not living with them anymore. If you're not meeting any of these criteria listed on this slide, you're still considered a dependent student and you still have to provide parental information. So unless you meet one of these criteria. Oops, sorry. This little chart right here explains, it kind of walks you through, if makes you answer these questions and determine if you are dependent or an independent student. So are your parents married to each other? Yes, no. Do your parents live together? Yes and no. There's also something that comes up very commonly is the concept of divorced parents. Hallie, what are your tips on that?
This infographic is for which parent you put, because we have a beautiful, diverse population. So we've all got different living situations going on. So this is to which parent you're going to put. So when you're going to put, if there was a parent that you lived with more, you put them. If that's not a scenario if your parents are divorced or separated and not living in the same residences, your biological parents. You would put the parent that you think provides more than half of your support during the time frame listed on the FAFSA. Then once you determine which parent that is, we're asking about your parents' marital status in general, not their marital status to your other biological parent. So say your mom and dad got divorced, you live with your dad more, he's remarried, then you're going to put dad and stepmom's information and their family members. Again, this can get really complicated because we don't all fit in a box, which is fantastic. So feel free to follow up with us if you have questions. I think those are kind of some of the common scenarios that happen. This is also really confusing because there's a lot of situations. So for example, say that you grew up with your grandparent raised you. If your grandparent did not adopt you or have a legal guardianship, they would still not be included. More than likely in that kind of situation, you would be considered independent. So yeah, none of these people, unless they adopted you prior to age 13, like it says, will be your parent. And let us know if you have questions about that. Really confusing because they're the person who raised you, but that's just the way the FAFSA is set up at this time.
Thank you, Hallie. Next on the FAFSA is going to be the parent information. And on here, it's going to ask for the parent's social security number, the parent's last name, parent's first initial, and parent's date of birth. On here, if your parents do not have a social security number, you can enter all zeros in this field where it's asking for the parent's social security number, and it should let you bypass this section. Your parents not having an SSN does not mean that you cannot complete the FAFSA. So do not worry about, and most commonly, students put the ITN number on the SSN. That's not the number that you want to use. You just want to put all zeros. On here, it's going to ask you about the household size. And it's automatically going to populate your parents when you include them on there and yourself. And then in the white sections, the white bars right here, it's going to ask you to include any other number of those who live in your household, such as like siblings, grandparents. You just want to make sure you include anybody who's living in the household. I'm going to pause. Do we have any questions on the group chat?
Family has not filed taxes in the last 3+ years. What can happen with the filing process of FAFSA?
Okay, so it depends. So technically you could do the FAFSA, put in your information. It might not be an issue. So I don't want to go too far into this, but the U.S. Department of Education, the branch of the government that oversees this awarding financial aid, selects some students for a process called verification. What that means is when the colleges get your FAFSA, they all are required to verify the information you put on the FAFSA. In other words, make sure it's correct with documentation prior to awarding you. If you're one of those lucky individuals or families selected for verification, we're going to need verification that you filed taxes. If you were required to file taxes in the tax year that the FAFSA is asking for, currently it's 2019, and you didn't, that's going to be an issue. So if it never comes to the attention of the Office of Financial Aid, because you weren't selected for verification, not an issue. If it's like if you filed taxes in 2019, but not in 2017 or something else. Yeah, so it could be an issue. We don't really have a way to know without seeing your situation. Does that answer the question? So if you're selected for verification and you are required to file taxes by the IRS, you cannot get financial aid until that is resolved.
Technically, Hallie, you are required to file taxes.
Correct.
Lucky is if they don't catch it. So basically, yes, you have got to file your taxes to get a financial aid award for the most part.
If they're going to work on getting their taxes done, of course, can they still file the process, right? If they can still file
yeah.
through. Yeah. Will it get placed on hold or it?
Like I said, if they aren't selected for verification, it could be fine. But like Jennifer said, it's best practice just to take care of it now so it doesn't become an issue later. But yeah, they can still do the FAFSA. Yeah.
Christina, on the FAFSA, they can just select will file.
What the family might want to prevent is having to pay a lump sum for something that might be owed, for many years. That would be kind of worst case scenario, because then, they might be hesitant to have to pay many years worth of taxes in one time. So yeah, like I think Haley might have said, the sooner you address that, the better.
I don't want to get off track. I was going to say, like, we won't let the IRS know. It's not like once you do the FAFSA and we see, we're going to tell the IRS, but you won't be able to get financial aid. So that's a bummer.
Okay, the next portion of the FAFSA is the financial information. And this is where we go ahead and we're talking about the taxes. So this is it's going to ask, Christina, this is where I mentioned, it says already completed on here. There's going to be a drop down and you can select will file. And it's also going to ask for your parents' filing status, if they're filing jointly, if this, is just single filing. This is where you're going to go ahead and input that information. It's also going to ask if you're a student and you worked and you filed for taxes, it's also going to ask for your financial information on here, and it's the same steps for both parents and students. The FAFSA created a tool called the IRS Data Retrieval Tool, where you can generate your taxes online, and it can take it directly into the FAFSA, and that way you don't have to input that information manually. It works very well. I've done it myself, but it won't work for ORSA filers, undocumented parents, married parents who filed separately, amended return, or those who have had a recent return. It's going to be a lot difficult to use the IRS data retrieval tool if you fall in any of these categories. But overall, it's a very neat tool. It usually directs you to the IRS website. You input the same information. Actually, there's one right here. Here's an example of what it looks like when you're leaving the FAFSA to go into the IRS website. And you input the information that you used to file your taxes with, and then it will let you know if it was successfully generated. And if it's not, then it's going to take you to the screen where you have to input that information manually.
And Yuri, can I say one more thing about this too? It's another hiccup that I run into with students. Anything at all that doesn't exactly match your tax return, it will kick you out. So you have to have this spelling the same, middle initials the same, address is exactly the same, even down to a capital Northwest compared to lowercase Northwest. Otherwise, the data retrieval tool kicks you out, correct, ladies? Okay, I just wanted to double check because that's been my experience in the past. So you have to, it's best if you just have your taxes sitting right there and you copy it word for word, what it says on your taxes into the retrieval tool.
Okay, like mentioned, the IRS data retrieval tool allows for tax information to be transferred onto the IRS data from the IRS database. Participation is voluntarily, and student chooses whether or not to transfer the data or enter it manually. IRS will authenticate taxpayer's identity. If the tax record is found, the IRS will transfer that information and populate it into the FAFSA application. Like I said, it reduces documents requested by the financial aid office. So tax information that is going to be needed. It's going to ask if the student and or the parent worked in 2018. Here it can be like 2020. This is just an example. If they did not, then they say that they did not file taxes. They didn't work, they will not file taxes. And they will enter 0 on the wages. If they did work and file taxes, they will provide tax information using the IRS data retrieval tool or manually if needed. If you worked and did not file taxes, you will have to provide W-2s or 1099s. And most commonly, the Office of Financial Aid will ask you for the W-2s or the 1099 if you work but did not file taxes. And that usually happens if you're selected for verification too.
This is the part that I think scares everybody. So remember, you have help. So take a deep breath. And yeah, just kind of ask yourself these questions and then you'll know how to proceed, and we're here to help you.
Assets and investments.
Yeah, many of us, well, I'm just joking. Maybe I have a lot of assets. Many of this isn't a big important section. So depending on your family situation, you may or may not be required to put assets. So if you're not required to put those, don't. If it doesn't say that you have to put checking, savings, ignore that. Read the text carefully, reach out to us if you have questions, because you don't want to include retirement, very small business as described below. This can really change the estimated family contribution. It can be really difficult to change later. You can update it with your school, but it's going to be kind of a pain. So do your best to get it right the first time. For many of this is going to be mostly zeros, or you don't have to answer it. If this does apply to you, just make sure you don't over report something, so then it's going to change your award a lot drastically later if you're selected for verification. This is like a really tiny section kind of that not a lot of people talk about, but it can have a really big impact on the estimated family contribution. Do you want to elaborate on any of the examples, Yuri, or anything you've seen to help people out?
Yeah, so I think child support is like one of the biggest ones that always comes up, you know, if you include those on there or not. Or I am not very much familiar with the untaxed income. Hallie, I'm not sure if you want.
And I trust here that everyone will be honest. So yeah, the additional financial information lowers the estimated family contribution. So these are things that the FAFSA has determined that we can take into account as something that you or your parents have to pay. Unfortunately, it doesn't take into account alimony or other things, but it does take into account like child support paid. So it's actually in your interest to report that. It's also in your interest to be honest. So the untaxed income that's going to raise the estimated family contribution, please be honest. A lot of us, this is going to be zeros, but that's child support received, retirement accounts that were withdrawn, some kind of non-education VA benefits. And yeah, if you have questions, let us know, but be careful which numbers you pop in there, because if it turns out you made a big typo, that can really mess with your aid.
So the last step of the FAFSA is to sign and submit. And this is where the FAFSA ID for the parent and student comes in. Like I said, this allows you to electronically sign your FAFSA. It's gonna ask you, you can sign with signatures in different ways. You can submit with signatures. You can print a signature page, and usually the option to print the FAFSA and sign it and send it via mail is because parents who don't have a social security number cannot create an FSA ID. So then they have to sign in paper and then send that out. And usually the FAFSA generates or lists an address where you can send that signed, the printed version of the FAFSA through the mail. Otherwise, you can sign electronically and then go ahead and submit your FAFSA. And then you're going to get a confirmation page with a confirmation number saying, congratulations, you've gone ahead and completed your FAFSA. And then we recommend that after submitting the application, you follow up with the financial aid office or offices of the college that you want to attend. Sometimes it turns out that you might be selected for verification for OSU, but maybe you're not selected for verification for Portland State University. And you always want to make sure you are on top of being selected for verification, because you will have to submit documentation. And usually when a student is selected for verification, the timeline to get that paperwork process is pretty long. So you want to make sure you catch that in time to make sure that your aid is awarded in time, and then later even just dispersed to you on time. Also, you can contact them so you can see if you have your award letter ready, if they have your award letter ready for you. That way you can start comparing award letters with other institutions and seeing which one is best for you. And then finally, don't be afraid to ask questions. I can't stress this enough. Please ask questions if you don't understand a term, if you don't understand procedures, interest rates, loan disbursements, any of that, please make sure to ask. There's always someone out there that's willing to help, and usually that's the financial aid advisor's job to help students, even get a one-on-one with them.
Does the FAFSA consider only a family's situation before the pandemic, or would COVID-related situations be accounted for?
Yeah, we can do, so it depends on the school. So unfortunately, you do need to complete the FAFSA as advised. So for example, right now, you would have to put 2019 income information on the 2021-22 FAFSA, and you may have experienced the loss of income in 2020 due to the pandemic. You would want to then follow up with the schools and ask for a special circumstances appeal or a change of circumstances appeal. Most colleges do this. It is optional, but most colleges want to help you out. That's what we're here for. We want students to come. We want to update the FAFSA. So you would have to appeal through the college. At OSU, we call it a special conditions appeal. So do the FAFSA as it instructs, follow up with the colleges.
And I like to mention that this is not just for, anyone affected with the pandemic. It's just if there's any circumstance in your life that has changed since let's say 2019 that you have to report on the FAFSA, if there has been a loss of job or, just something changed in the household, you can always appeal this, and you can work with the financial aid advisor for the process. But there is always an option there to revise your aid if things have changed in the household.
Yes, so some situations I've had have been the job loss due to the pandemic. Sometimes a separation or divorce has occurred since the FAFSA was filled out originally, and all of those situations would be considered a change in the household, and that student, if the college allows it, can file an appeal like Hallie was talking about. So, but check with the financial aid office with the college that you're planning to attend. Then the last question that we have in the chat says, can you add colleges to the same application after submitting? And the answer is yes. You may go back and add colleges to your application after you've already submitted it.
The FAFSA's terminology is it's very scary. It's gonna ask you to make a correction, like if you did something wrong to begin with. That just means that you're making a change or adding something to your FAFSA. So don't be scared if you have to make a correction to your FAFSA. It's totally okay.
And if you are needing some extra support filling out your FAFSA, we ask you to text this number that's on the screen, and then we can set up personal appointments with you and go over this stuff a little bit more in depth and help you if you need help. So that's just an option that's available. We would be happy to help you if you need help, or if you know of someone that needs help, please feel free to pass this number on. It's actually a texting number that will reach me, and then I will set up appointments with the appropriate people to help you. Anyway, yeah.